Oh, fuck! So, obviously, welcome to WandaVision, episode 5. Totally stealing all of my tricks. And obviously there's going to be spoilers from here on in, because we're going to talk about shit we've just seen. And... oh my god!
Wow.
So, I don't know, it's almost like... I just want to skip to that ending. I just want to talk about the ending.
Go on then.
So does this mean... holy fucking shirtballs. Does this mean that...
oh, now you're stealing my thing.
You introduced me to the good place, so, that's on you. So does this mean now that officially the MCU and the... I want to say it was Fox. It was Fox, wasn't it?
It was Fox.
Yeah.
Disney
Fox
Disney.
X-Men movies are now canon together. That's enormous. That's fucking huge. And it means... what, outside of the Fantastic Four, you finally got the entire Marvel canon in one place at last. And I'll say it before. No, I'll say it before. I'll say it before I say it again. This is when they should be doing Civil War. Yes. So in that last moment, you had. Now, interestingly, when they showed him from behind, I saw the silver hair and didn't jump to Quicksilver. I jumped to, is it going to be is it going to be an old Steve Rogers? So I just saw silver, grey, old, blah, 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 blah. But thinking about it, that would have to be Steve Rogers as you saw him at the end of Endgame, because this would be that timeline. So actually, he'd have had to have been a lot older. But yeah, so when you turned around and it was there, I was just like, So, again, this is... I mean, I think it was you said that this is a brilliant way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and obviously I can't take any credit for this, because obviously I've been, reading, or largely avoiding, to be fair, but only catching the headlines of basically, everyone, and I'm sure there's people out there like, Christian or probably Matt, who probably know more about this than we do, but basically that WandaVision was being touted as being that bridge between the MCU and essentially it's mutants, because obviously Fox had the biggest range of mutant titles with the X-Men and the associated characters, which is why you had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. dancing around and having to do Inhumans rather than mutants, and specials rather than mutants, and all that other sort of stuff. So that this would be a chance, because obviously Wanda being a reality warper, which obviously is one of the things that this episode in particular is now kind of basically starting to tease out in terms of what her powers actually can do, which is pretty much whatever the plot fucking requires, essentially.
There's not a lot of limits.
Which, to be fair, so
what can she do? Everything.
Keeping it broadly similar to how she was done in the comics now, essentially.
I mean, she was largely... omnipotence possibly it's not far off. I mean, there wasn't much she couldn't... there really genuinely wasn't an awful lot she couldn't do.
Well, when you can essentially manipulate reality to do whatever you want, there isn't much further you can go at that point.
Oh, that's a power I'd love.
But yeah, so it's very much a way that this could be used to bring mutants into the MCU, but obviously no one had any real ideas how they're going to do it. And obviously, we do need to say that we still don't know if this actually, because of the fact it's Wanda's reality powers.
Well, hang on, we can get into that, because basically, if you think to the scene in the middle of the episode where Wanda comes out of her bubble, I mean, how come she gets so many people in her bubble and we're allowed like 4? This is just rude. So, but she comes out of her...
COVID doesn't exist in her bubble.
No, she hasn't got a COVID in her bubble. I wouldn't have thought. But she came out, and it was Wanda as we know her. It was Wanda as those characters would know her, because she was in largely her movie costume. And obviously there was also the footage of her breaking Vision's body. Now, interesting that, yes, that sort of confirms it. She has reanimated his corpse, and that is his corpse wandering around in there, which is a theory I had a couple of episodes back. he was, and you raised it. What were they doing with his body that he was laid out on different tables with like wires stretching across like the gaps?
Given one of the themes of the early MCU movies with Shield and the Tesseract was basically weapons research and essentially how they had pinged sort of Earth's sort of or the presence of Earth on sort of the radar of all of those cosmic sort of powers out there, like the Kree and the Skrull, etc., etc., etc. So who's to say that Sword aren't doing exactly the same thing? Which is ironic because one of the things they obviously talk about is that they're certainly characters within Sword position as basically Wanda is circumventing Vision's living will to not be used as a living weapon. We have no assurances that isn't exactly
what they were doing.
Sword were doing, and that's part of the reason why she went in there, full of basically hell and rage and
So that Wanda comes out. So there is an argument to be made that there is someone else controlling this, and whoever does that would show them the Wanda they expect to see, as opposed to Wanda choosing a brand new outfit, for example. I don't think that's the case. It's just another thought you could have. I think it is Wanda.
I think it's Wanda.
But there were moments on when Vision then started to question her in the house, where she didn't seem to quite know everything, and I think there's hints there that while it is all her, she's struggling to hold it together. Because you've then got the question you had about name. Don't know her name. Neighbour kills a dog.
Oh, Agnes.
Agnes is aware she's on a TV show because she offered to do a retake of a line that didn't go how she knew Wanda wanted it to go. So most people don't seem to have that awareness.
And then, of course, you had the thing, obviously, technically not last episode, the episode before, where her and the black guy
across the fence.
And he's doing the thing. And clearly, they both seemed, because that's when we had the whole conversation, I think, on one of our reviews about how that element reminded me of that. And I think I've decided it was probably an Outer Limits episode, or whatever that was called, rather than Twilight Zone.
Oh, right, okay.
The guy that can make the boy that can make wishes come true, and everyone was scared of him in case he wished their mouths away or whatever. So there's definitely something on there, and again, this kind of ties in with some stuff I saw in reference to last week's episode, where you had the what's going on in the outside world, and where they're kind of identifying that all of these characters basically are inhabitants of the actual Westview, and that they were doing very sort of crime procedural, where they're putting up the mug shots of who they actually are and who they're portraying in sort of Wonderworld. And there are various articles pointing out that one of the characters we didn't see during that, when you consider how central they've been up until that point, was Agnes's character. So I know that there are a lot of fan theories floating around at the moment as to who she is in terms of when she's not being Agnes. But yeah, it's raising it does that really good thing that a lot of good television does, which is it kind of gives you answers to some stuff while raising a shitload more questions along the way.
Yeah. There'll be the big question that it won't answer till near the end,
if at all,
if ever.
Whether there's going to be a second season or not,
depending on what their plans are.
Yes.
Then there'll be
what I said.
questions of the week that will get answered possibly next week, possibly the week after. And like you say, the new questions get set in between. That's standard format, but it's when done right and done well, you get a series like WandaVision. I'm still finding it really exciting, and I think what Disney seems to be doing really well, that I think anything commissioned by Amazon Prime seems to do, even though I don't watch an awful lot on there. But Netflix seems to fall a little bit foul of not doing, is they let the episode be what the episode needs to be.
Yeah.
So you've got anything from 31 minutes to 41 minutes. There's like a 10-minute window so far, and any number in between.
The Mandalorian actually
did the same.
The prime example.
Yeah.
You would literally have an episode that was 30 minutes, another episode that was 57 minutes, and it's literally you do however long the story for that particular episode actually needs to get the points across that you want raised, the questions raised, the emotional points reached, whatever it is. And it's absolutely, I know we've said it before, this is absolutely what streaming television should be about, because you aren't beholden to programming schedules.
No.
You aren't beholden to having commercial breaks at set points, all of this sort of stuff. So if you need 35 minutes to tell that particular story, take 35 bloody minutes. Don't chop 5 minutes of it and end up with a garbled mess. Or on the flip side, as we see with a lot of syndicated TV, don't take a story that only needs 35 minutes and try and pad it to a 45 minute to an hour episode, because that's just fucking tedious.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I don't know. It was all so exciting. I can't.
Yeah.
My brain's gone.
I mean, lots of interesting, like the fact that when she came out of the bubble, she was speaking in her Sokovian accent.
Oh yes, yeah, but not every line, just most.
Yeah. But again, that telling because of the fact that she's obviously very pissed off, and given we'd had the stuff earlier about how certainly elements within SWORD are viewing her as a radicalised terrorist.
But let's be clear on the accent thing. She had it for like a movie and a half, and then it didn't really seem to exist in the films either, to be fair. Every once in a while, her or the director would remember for a couple of words. So I think, I don't know how much of that is actually relevant and how much is just they've just never been that consistent with it.
I know, I kind of always got the vibe with that is, and again, it might be media shorthand, because we don't necessarily always know. As a casual viewer, I know that there are people that plot timelines because there's all that stuff going on about how Spider-Man's screwed up the timeline because of plotting and everything. But
really,
long story,
okay.
which I don't really know many details about, because it's the kind of stuff that absolute.
I'll Google it. It's fine. Don't worry.
The sort of detail obsessed geeks get involved with. But you don't really have a necessary concept of just how much time has been spent outside of the movies. So I kind of always took that progression as basically Wanda kind of moving away from that Hydra influenced, radicalized sort of fictitious Eastern European sort of background, and essentially becoming more mainstream, more I'm trying to think of what the word is, but I suppose homogenized in a way. It's not the word I'm thinking of. Integrated. Into sort of the kind of culture that she was initially so opposed to, and part of that is represented by her basically losing her accent, and it's only when she's in, shall we say, an emotional place that elements of that tend to come back. So personally, I think that decision again was deliberate for this particular scene, because she was obviously they've just tried to kill her essentially, and then make out that no, we weren't trying to kill you, it was just a precaution, but the usual sort of government bullshit that we always see in shows like this. Clearly she wasn't having any of it, and she's a fucking telepath. She can tell what you were thinking by reading your mind. So
she's in control of like a whole town of people. I think trying to hide something from her is a really stupid move.
Yeah.
But that bloke, he's a military and baddie, so they're never blessed with actually making the smartest decisions in these kind of dramas, are they? But can I say,
it's almost a trope.
Uncanny, like the X-Men. But see what I did.
It's amazing. Also rather like the X-Men.
Yeah.
See what I did.
Yeah, you also brought Spider-Man into it. I think I know the Spider-Man thing, by the way. That's because at the start of first Spider-Man movie of current Spider-Man movies, the name of which completely escapes me. Homecoming? Is that the first one?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so that one. It basically did 8 years ago to refer to
Battle of New York.
Yeah, and it doesn't line up. Basically, I think that's probably the thing people are on about. So, because when I saw it in the cinema, I just went, oh, and just thought, oh, I don't know. It's not that important. So
it really isn't.
Just go with it. So but called it on the Family Ties reference in the opening sequence with the sort of painting. I did recognise the other one with the postcards, and I can't place it. That is another 80s sitcom, and I could not place it for the life of me. So yeah, so I think they were going for a bit more generic rather than styling particularly after one this week. But of course, then in theory, mind you, it's not been literally every week, has it? But we should look at 90s for next week. So they could be Will and Grace.
Or Roseanne.
They could, yes. See, that was 90s, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think where I lived when it was on, but yeah, it was definitely 90s.
Might also have been like late 80s, I'm not really sure.
I want to say it was definitely in the 90s. Because it crossed over with Ab Fab after Ab Fab had its main heyday.
So yeah, that probably would have to have been the 90s.
Yeah, and it was definitely on when I was living in Letchworth, so that's late 90s. So I'm intrigued to see how they keep the stylization. Obviously, that's massively breaking down now. Is Wanda going to lose control?
That's what, especially because I think, again, one of the other questions as well, because it's weird. You are kind of getting. It's actually one of the things I think I really liked about this episode. Is you've literally kind of got like two parallel stories running along, which is obviously you've got the sitcom story, obviously with the kids and the dog, and and you have that again, that very sitcom moment of kids having to learn to deal with grief for the first time, and it's pretty much always the loss of a family pet, and obviously it's
normally a dog at that.
Yeah, and it's obviously slightly complicated by the fact that we are dealing with one, superheroes, two, reality warping, all of that sort of stuff. But there's very much that whole Wanda trying to be the responsible mother and basically saying, no, you can't run away from your grief. You have to face it. It's this, it's that, it's the other.
Wanda, you can't.
You can't actually reverse death, while literally at the same time there's very much a sense, I mean, this may be completely turned on its head, but that's exactly what Wanda herself is doing with this whole sort of reality bubble over Westview.
I took it as the whole point of that entire speech.
But also it raises kind of the link question of is that what she's trying to do with Vision? Because like this thing I mentioned to you with because it's kind of popped up intermittently. So like it was in the first episode. We've not really seen a huge amount of it since, but they were kind of back there again with this episode of Vision's place of work, which is very much computational, whatever, which is doing unspecified things with. Obviously, back then it wasn't computers; it was typewriters and punch cards and that sort of stuff. It is now moving into computers, but essentially, is this all a way that she's basically trying to find some way, essentially, to either replicate or replace the Mind Stone? Or bring Vision back in a...
So that's what that company is actually doing.
Well,
they are trying to properly bring him back so she hasn't got to sustain his life anymore.
Yeah, but at least that's what my theory is around all of that, because of the fact that it's very unspecified. No one knows what they're doing there, just that they have to do these calculations. When they do them, they then have to do more calculations, and it's all just, we do them because they need doing, is essentially the rationale. So no one really understands what's going on. So that was, again, a nice little mystery.
And this proves that they do not have Doctor Who in the MCU. Because if they had that, Wanda would know to just recreate Adric. He'd do it all on block transfer or whatever it was called, and it'd all be sorted. She'd have Vision back in no time.
But no one likes Adric, so they wouldn't listen to him anyway.
I liked Adric. I always really liked Adric. I never understood as I grew older all the hate for him. I thought he was cool. I always kind of wanted to be him when I was like 9 or 10 or whenever it was.
But he was a bit the ginger stepchild.
Well, I either wanted to be him or Tegan, obviously.
Not Nyssa.
Never really wanted to be Nyssa. I like Nyssa, but never really wanted to be Nyssa. This went odd, didn't it? Are we done?
I'm done.
I think we are done.
You're talking about Doctor Who, we're done.
Oi!